Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Time for Impact podcast. Chris Wade here, and I'm with my co-host, Matt. Hi, Matt.
Hi,
How are you?
Chris. Hi, Chris. All good here. Looking forward to speaking to our guest today.
Yeah, and our guest is here as well. And as always, we try to bring you someone who's doing something a little innovative, a little groundbreaking, moving the profession of volunteerism or the thinking around volunteerism forward in ways that perhaps we haven't explored before. And of course, we've kept that trend going. And today's guest is Victoria McCormack from Grow Remote over in Ireland. Welcome to the podcast. I'll tell you what, I'll let you tell our listeners all about Grow Remote rather than me doing the introduction. Perhaps you'll tell us about yourself, your organization, your mission, and other things that you do.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me, Chris and Matt. I'm absolutely delighted to tell you all things about Grow Remote. So, Grow Remote is a social enterprise. It was founded in 2018, and our mission is to solve the problems of remote work to unlock social, economic, and environmental impact for individuals, employers, and local communities. And I'm their community facilitator. So I have the honor of supporting volunteers across the country who are running social events to combat that feeling of loneliness that can come with remote work. And a little bit about me. So I actually got involved with Grow Remote by simply becoming a volunteer. And that's something I really like to see, and I see a lot of others who are involved in that social enterprise, that community space, is they usually start out as a volunteer because it's something that they connect with and are passionate about. And I was working in one of the big corporates. My background's in corporate, and I'd been a remote worker since 2013. So I was a remote worker in essence before it was cool to be a remote worker. And I became the ambassador at that corporate company for Grow Remote, where I did a talk for them about my experience, especially in the leadership space, as I was a leader myself and had been in remote work. And with that, I saw the great things that they were doing. And when I left the corporate space to start my own business, I then had more time to volunteer and had more flexibility and became a volunteer, was running social events and taking that step to kind of post it online and celebrate the community. And then from there, Grow Remote was like, hey, you're doing some really cool stuff. We'd like you to kind of come on board and show us how we could elevate out the Munster region. So for those that aren't based in Ireland, it's a region covering 5 counties in the south of Ireland. So I did that for 6 months. And I literally tell people I have the best job ever because I'm going on dog walks, sea swim, and saunas. That after work social that you don't get, when you're on like a Friday night in the office and you get to go for drinks.
Yeah.
Well, I get to create those spaces and work with volunteers to do that. So, yeah, it's the best job ever. I get to have so much fun doing it. And that's not the only part of Grow Remote, but that's the part I'm involved in. We do training and we do advocacy work as well. And we support employers who are looking to transition to remote. So we've got our fingers in a lot of pies in the remote work ecosystem.
Yeah, and well, you may not know because I don't know if you've listened to other episodes of the podcast, Victoria, but Matt and I have got probably a complete obsession about communities and the role the volunteers play in them. Tell us a bit more about it. You call them change makers, yeah? Have I got that right?
Yeah, so they are change makers is something that we kind of started with, and then we kind of transitioned some of that language to local leaders because they're
Right.
acting as leaders in their community.
Mm.
So last year in 2024, we actually finished on 88 communities across the country and internationally, primarily in Ireland, on the island of Ireland.
Mm.
And with that, we have over 70 volunteers who are all creating spaces for people to connect in the local area. And what people don't know is, I believe 40% of Ireland is rural and people are
Yeah.
living in those
Yeah.
areas. Anything rural can be feeling quite remote. Add remote work on top of that, it's like a double whammy. So these communities, these local leaders, they are creating spaces to help people connect, collaborate, share experiences, and give a space to bring people together. And that's what Grow Remote supports with our community fund.
Yeah, and volunteering has that sort of role about bringing. Well, I always think about bringing communities together. Anyway, it's the social cohesion. It's the fabric of society. People pulling together in whatever way, whether you call it volunteering, helping out, getting involved, but getting together in their communities and making things happen. Improving the lives of their fellow residents. It feels like you've hit on something as an organisation as well. An already isolated world that you're describing is becoming even more isolated because people have moved away from the office space, and you're obviously trying to build a sort of social connection and cohesion around that. But also, when I was reading your reports and stuff, and it hadn't occurred to me, there's also the element of some of these areas have really terrible economic inequalities, and actually the working from home actually can be part of the solution to breathing new life into communities which were perhaps being either abandoned or people commuting out of the area every day for their daily work.
Yeah, like there's even islands around Ireland, and we did an interview with a great community member. He's living on in an island called Inishturk, and from him living there with his two children, that also maintains the school being open because there needs to be kids going to that school, and that means that more people living on that island allows it to thrive and support whether it's the local post office, the local pub, the local shop. So especially because if you work remotely, you don't need to live in the city center, and or even in suburban areas. You can live anywhere in essence. So by doing that, by being able to move out into those more rural areas, it could be the difference, as I said, from the school staying open. It could be the difference from your local post office. And if you're living in that rural area, instead of going into the city and spending money on coffee or sandwiches in the city coffee shops, you're actually going to Mary's local cafe in the local town, and they're getting more business and they're able to thrive more because they know that Victoria's going to pop in every Wednesday. Like something I do where I live is in Kinsale, they have a market, and on a Wednesday I go down there. It's like a nice little treat for myself where I get to support the local market, which I wouldn't be able to do really if I was working in the city center and having to commute day in day out. And sometimes I might even be cheeky, and on my way home from the office I might stop at McDonald's, whereas now I'm going and getting my food in the local shop, bring it back and cooking and living a better lifestyle as well.
It sounds brilliant. It sounds amazing, and it sounds so intrinsically linked to this idea of kind of local and community based leadership. I guess leadership kind of takes like many forms. There's different leadership styles, there's different approaches to leadership in different areas, and sort of community based volunteer leadership is something we've talked about on this podcast before and the importance of it. I wonder, like, if you were going to describe sort of the essence and the sort of approach of that leadership, what do you see that as? What does it mean to you? And I'd also be really interested in what sort of Grow Remote do to sort of develop and sustain that leadership culture. And just a real practical question of like, where do you find these people? How do you find a community leader in this space?
Great question. What I'd say is I'd maybe start with the last one first. And like what I'd say is we run community-based events. So we always encourage our local leaders who are running those events to find more people like them and who are interested and are really engaged in what they're doing. And it's as much as they're a local leader, we don't see leader as like a title. And that's something I'm really passionate about, which is called leading without a title. And with that, you're really connecting to your why and why you want to be here and contribute. And then how does that filter up to what Grow Remote is trying to do? So finding those people who are interested, come into those spaces, and then from there, even in your employment, if you're sharing what you're doing, maybe there's a social channel that they can showcase what they're doing, and people might have curiosity and ask, how do I get involved? And we have a welcome session that we have every month. That's once a month. It's 1 hour. So it's really simple. It's a 1 hour session, and it really just showcases what Grow Remote is about. We have videos on it showing our events, our experiences, why we do what we do, and that it's fully flexible and it's fun, and that really comes across in our videos, and that's put on Eventbrite. So our local leaders will be telling people to register onto the Eventbrite, come to that session, and just kind of stretch that curiosity. We'll then deliver that, and then from there we offer a one-to-one session thereafter, just to kind of chat one-on-one to see what is it that they liked, what are they interested in, and then from there get them set up to run that first event and run that first space. And especially if there's someone already in that area, or even someone that's close, we then connect them via email or even via WhatsApp. So that's like a few ways we do it. And then also our social media platforms, we're usually advocating for people if they want to get involved, and we promote our events. And we always say, if there's not something happening where you are, why not engage and start something yourself? Be that change maker, have that courage, lead without that title. And then another way is with our training that we deliver. So we deliver a training called Leading Remote and Hybrid Teams and Transition to Remote. And on that, our facilitators who are delivering that fully funded training, they tell the remote and hybrid employees that are on that course about the community spaces that are available to them, and are encouraged to join them and even to get involved themselves as well. So there's a couple different avenues. Some people even see us in a press release, maybe a local leader's done and has been curious. Some people just reach out directly on Eventbrite and say, this looks cool, how do I get involved? So there's a variety of ways. It's not a one size fits all. And even we see some people who come and it's not a fit for them at that time, but we maintain the conversation and check in. And usually, even 3-6 months time, they'll come back when they're ready. And then we'll go through that onboarding session again. And sometimes it's just a one-to-one chat to see how they can get involved instead of like the full opportunity. Maybe it's just, I can only take this part, but it's anything that they can do to help is really beneficial to those around them.
I imagine that they feel much more like they're volunteering for their local community than they're volunteering for the organisation, which I think is the way it should be. Don't get me wrong, but it means that you as an organisation then are presumably more in the sort of convening and curating kind of space, creating the atmosphere, creating the environment, and some of the tools for for people to get involved in their local community, and being much less directive, or do you feel that you're playing a more directive role than I'm describing?
Well, I suppose we're solving a problem in essence. So I know that there's like statistics shown that people who don't work in the office are 26% more likely to feel a sense of loneliness. And
Mm,
if you were to ask anyone, like I went to an apartment complex there the other day in the city centre,
mm.
and they hadn't heard about Grow Remote, even though that was where our biggest community was, which was fascinating to me. But I did a poll on that and just asked, what do you see as the biggest challenge for remote work? And every single one in the audience said, like, not having human contact, loneliness, the absence of individual,
Mm.
even in this huge, amazing complex that they were living in.
Yeah.
So I think that we're solving a problem that they are connected to themselves, but with that, with the way we do it is that they're helping their community, and they are the advocates of that, and they're like
Yeah.
ambassadors. So
Yeah.
it's kind of leading with purpose that they're connected in. We're just giving the tools and
Mm,
giving the space to do that. And then also we have a community fund. So because our training is fully funded, that is where a good part of our revenue comes from. And then we input that back into the community so they have access to that. So we're also giving them resources to do that. So we're
mm,
reinvesting back into the community. Even last year, I think just on community events alone, we spent €18,000 to
mm.
spend that. It's really great. I tell a quick story. One of our community members was running like events in like a local bar, and they were kind of doing the rounds in a really small town. This person had been living there 3 years, didn't know anyone either. So she became a local leader, and more community members came. And in the end, the another pub came and was like, when are you coming to my pub? And like it really like engaged the community, and they were doing like a little community crawl in essence. So I think when experiences like that happen, they really feel that they're embedding something really great in the community, and Grow Remote is just helping them to do that and giving them the knowledge to do that.
I'm assuming you don't work in isolation. You embedded within each of the individual communities and partnering with other organizations who are involved in breaking isolation, solving loneliness, building social cohesion and things like that, I imagine.
I'm glad you said that, because tomorrow is
It
a
wasn't
very big
prompted, was
day.
it?
Oh, so tomorrow is a famous day in Ireland. It's called Daffodil Day. And Daffodil Day is part of the Irish Cancer Society. And they actually announced 3 days ago that they need to raise 30 million this year to support the increase of transport services that are needed. And we believe we've built this like really social, strong communities of people that are connecting, and we're looking to then take that into community partnerships. So an example is tomorrow I'm going to my local town. It's called Kinsale, and we've got about 12 remote workers who are coming in volunteering throughout the day to help raise money for Daffodil Day. So, and this is not a Grow Remote like day. These are just remote employees. Grow Remote's just bridged the gap and given them the information on how to get involved. And with that, they're going to be donating, raising money. But what Grow Remote has done is they're using their community fund to fund teas and coffees and snacks for everyone. And then usually we have a last Friday drinks on a Friday in Kinsale. And what we're doing is we're opening it up to all volunteers, and we're actually going to have a volunteering wrap party. But what it also means is people who are working during the day who can't get chance to go out and donate can actually come to that wrap party, donate, enjoy some pizza, and celebrate the volunteers who did contribute on that day. And that's not just happening in Kinsale. There's something happening in Longford in the local hub where they're having a coffee morning. There's been a bake sale already where they've raised money. They raised €650 just on a bake sale. There is something happening in Skerries, Balbriggan, and there's another community getting involved in Claremorris and Mayo. So that's just like a glimpse of a community partnership that we're doing. And there's actually a famous word in Ireland. It's an old Irish tradition, and that's called mehel. And what that means is basically in like old traditional times on a farm, like neighbors would come in and help on the crop and like help each other out. What Grow Remote is doing is like taking that Mehel approach where it's like the community bands together and we help each other. So we're bringing our community of remote workers to help fill some of the gap of volunteers that are needed. And then even I've had the Simon community in Cork reach out to us who help homelessness, try and get rid of homelessness. And they were looking for volunteers for their annual ball that they do that helps raise money. We filled those volunteers. And the best thing that I think to recognize is because remote employees aren't commuting, they have that extra time and flexibility to maybe spend some of that time giving back. But bridging that gap and showing them how that they could get involved is something that we're trying to do more and more of, but also inspiring our local leaders. What do they want to do? What are they passionate as the volunteer? And what is happening in their community? Because what might be happening in Kinsale may not be happening at a national level, or could be something different in another local area. So, and we're just wanting to help facilitate that.
I should just say, just for listeners, because I'm incredibly slow at editing these podcasts. So when you're listening to this podcast in July or August, and Victoria's talking about an event that's happening tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 28th of March, just so we're clear.
One of the things we've talked about on this podcast before is the kind of notion of volunteering organizations sort of curating experiences for volunteers. And this, what you described there, sounds like some of the essence of that and what we've touched on before, whereby you're sort of you've got a network of leaders in local communities, you've got different societal challenges or opportunities, and you seem to be really in the business of kind of linking those two things up and giving people the tools or the structure to kind of make their own choices and develop their own experiences of how to solve those things or how to contribute their time to meet some of those challenges. Perhaps I think what you're doing there is like a really special thing, and it seems, you know, it would be perhaps easy to step into the space where you're trying to be more like directive about that. But it sounds like you're really staying in the zone of like, actually, we're trying to put opportunities around, but the choice and control and the sort of the power continues to lie with those volunteers to have the agency to decide how they respond. You know, they're not volunteering in a way that looks like a job or a role. What they're doing is being presented with opportunities and kind of being invited to respond to that. Is that fair? Is that part of your approach?
Yeah, so with that, one of our values is being community led and mission driven. So, being community led is to listen to our local leaders. And I always see it. It might not be a glamorous way of saying it, but I always say, you're trying to, as a local leader, you're trying to get to Paradise City where every remote worker in your area feels super connected, has created that sense of belonging, and knows what like remote job opportunities are available, and they feel that they can thrive in that environment. I'm just the ugly barriers you see on the motorway and keeping that on the yellow brick road to help you get to Paradise City. That's it. I'm just here to help you and guide you, but I'm not in every single community. I don't know everything that goes on. It's just impossible to know. So I might give insight and perspective based on the many people I've spoken to and the many events and environments I've been in because of the time I've been with Grow Remote. But that doesn't mean that I am like the decision maker or I know everything. So I always empower the local leaders. If they have an idea and they want to try something, I can give them, here's my thoughts. Have you considered this? And just be curious and ask the right questions, but then still give them the opportunity to try something new if they want to, or to try it in a different way. Because what happens in Kinsale in the South Island could be completely different 30 minutes down the road in Clonakilty. So it's just having that awareness. And then also for our local leaders, we like to recognize like the time and energy and effort that they put in, because we do say consistency is key. And with that sort of consistency, to have like different milestones for them. So we have like a first year, we recently brought out a first year, a third year, and a fifth year. So if you contribute for a year running events, you're a community contributor. And then after 3 years, you're seen as a community builder. And then as after 5 years, you're seen as a community advocate. And these are something that we'd rather recognize the time and energy that someone is putting in to build community versus spending too much time on all the different logistical ways that they do it, and celebrate that.
I think that's really interesting as well, and there's some real innovation in that. I think in terms of like often in volunteer involving organisations I've been connected to, and I'm sure this will be familiar to people listening. Our milestone recognition normally is you've been here for 5 years, you've been here for 1 year, you've been here for 10 years, you've been here for 20 years. What does that actually mean? It doesn't actually mean anything other than that you turned up for that amount of time, which is fine. But like, I think there's something really innovative and exciting in this idea of like, actually, there is something connected to the kind of, I guess, maybe like what you've actually achieved through that, and what you're continuing to work towards, particularly like outside of traditional role titles as well, right? Like, because I sense you're not big into that. I just think there's some real innovation in that, and it's really exciting, and something others might reflect on, which is if we're recognizing and celebrating the contribution of volunteers, particularly in a milestone way, how can we do that which is kind of goes beyond the number? I mean, it sounds, that's a really exciting example, I think, that might challenge us all to think a little bit differently about that.
What we do as well, and this is only new, this has only happened this year, I want to call that out, because we're looking at like the life cycle. And I suppose based on my corporate background, it was something that you would get recognized, right, for like the time that you had contributed and been part of the company. But I've thought that by having something like this, that, well, what does someone do in a year? And everyone's journey is different. So how do you kind of bucket that in essence? And community can take time to build. You might have taken over from someone, and to give people that time, but also recognition for the work that they do is important. And not only do we give them, we gave our first years a certificate and tote bag, and then the third years have got a mug and a certificate as well. I won't say the 5 years because they don't know what they're getting yet, and it's taken a bit of time, but definitely it'd be something really special. But we also gave them a digital badge, which they can put on their LinkedIn, which I think is really cool to do. And it's something then that they can promote themselves on a professional platform where they can leverage the volunteering that they're using to showcase their skill set. And I think that's really important, because if I was to be hiring someone and I got to hear the volunteering that they were doing, why they were doing it, you really hear someone's passion. And then to be able to connect that by just looking at their LinkedIn profile, I think is a really nice way to strengthen their credibility for the time and energy that they're putting in. Now, thankfully, our local leaders are asked to take photos at events, so they'd probably have a reel of photos anyway, and they'll probably be bringing out the family photo album in essence of Grow Remote events. But I think that's another nice way to link the energy that they're doing by using a digital badge that they can use on their professional profile.
Yeah, I love digital badges. It just maybe prompted me to think a bit about the demographics of your volunteers as well. So a broad, obviously the digital badge makes you think of younger audiences, although I mean probably younger audiences in our world is anybody under 60. But yeah, and presumably you're talking about working age people generally speaking. But what is the demographics in terms of age and gender and so on in the
So I
volunteers?
definitely would say that we do have more female volunteers, but we do have a variety of age demographics and even backgrounds and diversity. We've got, and I suppose if you think about it, like a lot of our community, when you come into a new community, you are usually not from that area and you don't know anyone. So this is filling a real need for those that are kind of new to the area or they have been living in the area a while, or maybe their friends have left. So I think that like there's a huge variety. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what sort of age demographic that we have exactly, but there is variety there, and there's over 70 volunteers. There's people, with kids, without kids, with fur babies instead, and we're looking for like the remote and hybrid employee, right? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
really that's the sort of demographic that we're looking at. Are you working fully remote or hybrid?
Sure.
Because you're going to truly understand the problems that we're trying to solve, and because we're community led, we want to know what the problems are. So we want to speak to that audience to listen to them and make sure that the work that we're doing is solving and
Yeah.
closing some of those gaps.
Yeah, I suppose I was just get it in my head. I was thinking through, well, that means that the sort of social things that you described and some obviously have to appeal to a wide range of
Yes.
interests and demographics, which is great. But also, what you said there around the feedback loops as well is kind of interesting and important, because they're going to have, I imagine, the knowledge on the ground works. I think you said earlier on what works in different communities and so on. And you as an organisation are advocating for remote working, so you also want them to be your gatherers of data, gatherers of intelligence that presumably you can aggregate up and build a narrative around. But actually, there's a little bit of citizen science potentially there, I imagine, for your volunteers as well.
Yeah, we'd have like an event survey that we send out after every event, and we use those sort of data points to help us influence decisions. And we also have a local leader survey that we ask for our volunteers. So, and then like with that, we're always looking for feedback from our group. And when I'm attending events, I'm always just demonstrating curiosity and asking questions and listening and seeing, look, remote work can solve a lot of problems, but like it can't solve every problem that's out there, and some challenges maybe are best suited in like a different space, and it's really a case of we're a team of 9 people, but what we do for 9 people I think is pretty phenomenal as a group of individuals. But with that, with the 9, where are we best suited to advocate for remote employees on the island of Ireland and to really create Ireland as a really strong ecosystem for remote employees? And that's just kind of asking the questions, filtering it up as a team. And something we do as well to help that is we do local leader retreats. So it's isn't it I find it fascinating, like we're really big advocates of remote work and working in the office space, but we also understand that people do need to connect, and we're big advocates for that, and taking time out of their busy schedule just to meet others. And we do that ourselves. Like even before this, I was running a local leader collaboration session where we have optional sessions online once a month. But we also do retreats. So last year we did 2 retreats where our local leaders came together and we got chatting, and they told us what they were finding difficult, what their wins were, learning from each other, and then taking that and bringing that up to the Grow Remote team to see how we could be helping the people that are attending their events in the work that we do.
Victoria, I think I'd like to take us in just a slightly different direction. And one of the things that kind of leaders of volunteers, particularly in charities get engaged with, but also people who are responsible for sort of social impact in companies and organizations, is so one of the things that sort of often comes across both of our desks is corporate volunteering or employer supported volunteering. It seems like, sort of through your experience at Grow Remote, you've really got sort of a wealth of experience in trying to engage remote workers, basically, and lots of people in that space will have remote workforces, will have employees in that space. I'd be really interested, like, what advice would you offer to other organizations or companies, or what advice would you offer to, you know, leaders of volunteers within charities, for example, about how to sort of encourage that community participation among remote employees?
Yeah, I suppose reach out to us would be definitely one thing I'd say, because we'd love to help bridge that gap a bit better. Like, I've worked in the big corporates, and there's like lots of programs that they use to help run those sorts of events, but a lot of them are done to, like, obviously, bring people together in that specific area, and not every employer has enough people in their organization to do that, because they're remote, right? So I know employers that only have one person in Ireland. So is that really like possible? Whereas like with Grow Remote, we can actually bridge that gap, because we have not just one remote employee, we have over 1,000 of people that have been meeting up. Like last year, I think we had 2,500 people go to our community based events. So I think that like a big part of it is creating space and showing that you want them to get involved in the community initiatives, giving them the tools to do so, like educating them on what's available. Like there's a website here called Volunteer Ireland, and there is like hubs. That's actually how Chris and I met at a Volunteer Ireland session, and there are hubs across the country. Like it wasn't actually until more like in recent years that I knew that that was something that was available. So I think it's creating better visibility and reaching out to the organizations themselves, and like even reaching out to Grow Remote, because we have a lot of employer partners as well that we work with. And just I think something that we want to do more and do better is showcasing how it can just be as simple as reaching out. Volunteers can be hard to come by. And I also see I'd like to see more of like that younger demographic getting involved in volunteering and be able to see what's possible. But I think it's like knowing how, and just even if you were to just type in Google like volunteering here, or even go to your local community center, I think. So it's making it more visible, making it more accessible, and by doing that, like local community centers is another way of getting the word out.
I also wonder, sort of from my experience, I don't know what you think about this, but like people like me, for example, when corporate volunteering sort of starts to get discussed, we start to think about, what does the organization need corporate volunteers to do? Like, what jobs are we going to give them? What tasks are we going to give them? Which wall are we going to get them to paint? What trees are we going to get them to clear? What space are we going to get them to tidy up? Or what skills can we tap into, that they can bring into they can bring in and help train our employees on? Or who can they mentor? Or a lot of a lot of the stuff is kind of what seems to sort of fly around my head when this comes up, and it seems to be similar when I've talked to sort of peers about this. It seems like what's quite interesting with your approach is that you've like really flipped that on its head. Like, it's kind of like, actually the approach isn't about giving people jobs to do or finding them tasks to do or things. It's about presenting them with, or providing them the opportunity to, or the framework within, to come up with their own response, to sort of open their eyes to what they could solve locally, or how they can contribute locally using their skills and initiatives, rather than people like me having to decide what they're going to do for them, sort of thing. It feels like that's a really powerful and important shift, and turns that on its head a little bit for some people.
Yeah, it always go back to like their why. I'm really big on this. Is like, well, like, why do you want to get involved? And then looking at like your what and your how. And like, I knew the person who did the bake sale. I knew that they loved baking. I knew it was something they did as a side hustle, and I knew it's something that they were really passionate about. And they believed in what the Irish Cancer Society was doing, and they were like, well, I could do a bake sale. So I'm like connecting something that they're passionate about and also something that they can do in a way that contributes to this really amazing cause. So, and I also would say that a lot of the bigger charity organizations, like that I find, even like I've reached out to and be like, do you need any hand or help? It's usually filled and they are usually quite content. Like, oh, I've never got a response, because they have like that bridge of that corporate group. They're coming in, they're doing that thing, whether it's packing the sleeping bags or serving the meals. So I'd even almost go down a couple of levels. And when I mean down, just like those that have like more access to funding and more access to people, because they're much more renowned or well known because they've been around a lot longer. So I'd go and look and see, is there something even more at the local level that could be of benefit, and seeing how you could help. Like, even it could be as simple, like, I think of remote workers, they're lonely. Well, who else is lonely? Well, it's usually
Mm.
elderly. So if they're lonely, like, you could learn from them. So that's something that I'm looking to do more of, is like, if there's two people with the same challenges here, that by talking to one another, it could be a really wonderful experience. So, and that's not something that like I own, or even Grow Remote owns, but I'm looking at the problem
Mm.
and I'm looking at the
Mm.
why, and
Mm.
then seeing, is there something that could connect us to help each other. And I think that would be like a really wonderful thing to do. So I would say that being a bit more innovative, being a bit more creative, and I think we all like labels and putting things into boxes because it's a lot easier for us. But even just kind of seeing what's out there, what you have the time for. And I know Grow Remote is unique in that way as well, that with the type of things we do, and the people that we have the pleasure of working with, that they can have that flexibility. Not everyone can do that. It's not a one size fits all, but that's what's really working for us. And I would definitely empower and encourage people to see, is that possible for them. And a lot of it is just kind of, sometimes it's better to, it's like the phoenix mentality, where like the phoenix can like if you look in Harry Potter, right, the phoenix burns, but then it gets reborn and it can start fresh and start new. And sometimes it's like, let's go back to our root, let's go back to our why. What is it we're trying to achieve, and what are all the possibilities?
In some ways, you're like, we often talk about communities of interest. When you are dealing with communities of geography, of course, but actually in some ways you also are a community of interest, because you're people who are remote workers, and actually think about how can we as a community with that shared characteristic, if you like, work together to do things, yes, for each other, to break our own isolation, but actually to also help our community. So I think that's quite interesting. But you also mentioned community centres, which got me thinking. I was for many years involved in NCVO, who, if you don't know, or listeners don't know, are in some ways are the equivalent of Volunteer Island in the UK, in England, but a little bit more than that perhaps. But when they started, one of the things this is after the First World War, very much involved in, was recognizing that there was a gap in local communities who had been decimated through the war and so on. And they needed some kind of central hub to bring people together. So they actually started building community centres and brought the funding, and actually almost started as a community centre organisation and continued that, and it broke away and built more after the Second World War. But in some ways, it feels like you're doing a very similar thing. There may not be physical buildings, but what you are doing is building communities in places where that was perhaps falling apart around the edges, because a lot of these places, you said, are so isolated. It feels like there's some parallels there.
Yeah, I think that everyone has access at a click of a button of information in their mobile
Mm.
devices, and they don't go down to the local community center and just look at the notice board. And I think it's how to make that more visible. Like, even with our events, right? We'll put up posters, and the QR code, I can see if the QR code gets scanned. Putting up posters takes time. Printing them costs
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
You could do a whole outreach day, but in Ireland, every town has like notice boards on Facebook.
Mm.
Kinsale,
Mm.
it's a very popular town in Ireland, but there's like 35,000 people in this Facebook notice board. There's not 35,000 people in Kinsale. And but posting on that, you can capture the essence of like the community that's in there, because like you always get like the these steps need painting, or the toilets aren't being used, and like it's a space where community problems come up. but it's also a space where community solutions can be shared. So I almost see it as like because we've so much different ways of capturing information. There's Instagram, there's LinkedIn, there's TikTok. Like we've used other tools. We found WhatsApp is a really great place just to keep the community engaged because everyone has WhatsApp. It's simple, it's straightforward. You can monitor it to a certain extent, but with that, because it's digital and you don't have to be in a physical place and people are so busy in their lives now, that creates it like it kind of creates like a that community space that
Yeah.
in a virtual sense, but it also means that you can respond at any time. You don't have to find the person who put that poster up there and then in that moment, or figure that out. So I would definitely say that we have created a community in a variety of locations across Ireland that are being leveraged, but also that have a will and want to be involved and want to be pillars of the community and just really belong in their own way. And it can be as simple, right, as being able to go to the shop. Someone said to me, I used to go to Lidl as a remote employee and just be looking at people so they'd say hello to me because they just hadn't had that connection. But now they go and they're getting stopped. Hey, Victoria, it's so good to see you. How you getting on? Having your chat? And that's solving like the need that they have by just going to that 1, 2, 3 events. But now they're also getting involved in other ways, like their local tidy towns or even volunteering in their local GAA and
Yeah.
football club.
Yeah. Last one from me is you mentioned something that's probably really obvious, but I don't hear spoken about hardly at all when I speak to charities. And that's that people who work remotely, I wouldn't say necessarily that they've got more time on their hands, but they've got more flexibility generally over their time. So I just wondered what you think the rest of the sort of charity and volunteering sector could be learning from that, because I don't think I see enough strategies written to capitalize on that opportunity, or even just processes to amend volunteering to fit around that flexibility. So I wonder if you've got any thoughts for most of our listeners who are volunteer managers or volunteer professionals of some description, what they should be learning from that experience.
Yeah, I suppose with our community, one thing I love about obviously when we have a community of remote and hybrid employees from any employer, they are employed, they have a set of skills that they're able to deliver, and those skills are transferable. And they have their own needs and they do have flexibility because they have the opportunity to work remotely. But even with like our huge community, not every single person is raising their hand to volunteer, right? But it's also dependent on the cause and the purpose of that and how it connects to them. Like even me for the Daffodil Day, that's really important to me. Irish Cancer Society is really important to me, and that's because like I sadly lost both my parents to cancer, and with that, like the services that were available to me going through that was from the Irish Cancer Society. But because of the work that I get to do with Grow Remote and the learnings that I've made, know how I've got the skill set of knowing how to reach out and how to get involved. And I think there's a gap there in with a remote employee or even an office worker is how to get in front of people to show them how to get involved and how to get involved perhaps in their own way that they can connect with. I'm connecting with Daffodil Day because I don't mind doing that, like standing outside, wind, rain, or shine, because I connect to the cause. So I think sharing more of the why, your purpose, and also spending it is a bit of time, like spending it on whether it's on LinkedIn, social media, just trying to get in front of the audience. You can do all the outreach in the world, whether it's social media, posters, flyers, speaking at your local hub and still miss people. And I think patience is my year of 2025 for a multitude of reasons. But I think it's that and just trusting and believe, just reminding yourself and believing in what you do. And you'll find your tribe that want to get involved as well. It's just really having that strong messaging. And like even something we do is every week we call out our mission at the start of every meeting. Every week, one person reads out the mission, and then we talk about a value we've applied. So even just doing that and reminding yourself of that it will come up then in the conversations you have when either delivering in front of an audience or speaking to that local person that you walk past and you bump into while going into the shop.
So if anybody wants to get in touch, Victoria, what's the best way to do that, both with yourself or with Grow Remote?
Yeah, so Grow Remote is just your www.growremote.ie, and there's loads of information there on our training, or even if you wanted to look at our social value impact report that we did last year about the social value that Grow Remote is creating and the value of remote work. But also, if you wanted to run an event where you are, it's not just based in Ireland. We have a welcome session. It happens once a month, usually on the third Wednesday of the month. So if you go Grow Remote on Eventbrite, you'll be able to see all the variety of events that are happening across the country and some internationally. But also, even if you wanted to kind of have a chat with me, see if it is something you want to get involved in, Victoria at growremote.ie. And I'd be more than happy to chat with anyone and share a couple of videos. Actually, if you look on YouTube and search Grow Remote, you'll see our local leader retreat video and our community experience video, just to give you a glimpse of what it's all about. I think those videos really capture the essence of the spaces that we create to bring people together. So there's just a variety of ways to get involved. But yeah, doors always open. Feel free to come on by.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. Thank you so much for joining us. I think there's hopefully lots for our listeners to take away, but especially around the power of volunteering in sort of building up community connection. But also, I think there's lots for us to take away around potentially around how to engage remote workers in our own communities and our own causes that we all represent. Yeah, lots to take away. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and perhaps you'll come back and tell us how it develops over the next year or two.
But thanks for having me. It was great.
Wow, that's another one in the can. Matt, I always get to the wrap up and my brain is just overflowing with things and struggling to put them into a coherent structure. But there was lots there for me around the importance of community building, as always, the power that that's only going to be sorted by local people. And obviously, I think there's stuff for us to learn as a sector from what they're doing, and if nothing else, how do we tap into the opportunities that come from remote working as a sector? What did you take away, Matt?
So here's my big takeaway today, Chris. I think I was really struck by the fact that I think that this is an organization, I think, that really believes in people, and I think it's really putting that belief into practice. And I think the thing that I'm going to take away, or the thing I'm going to put some thought into, I suppose, and how I can bring this to some of the things I do, is that I think the challenge for us as organizations is like, maybe we should spend more time identifying what the challenges are or what the problems are rather than what the solutions are. If we go into that mode, if we go, we've got these challenges, and sort of move into convening mode rather than we've got these solutions and we know how to do them, we start to think a little bit differently about this. We start to think about the assets in a community, whatever that community might look like. We start to think about skills. We start to think about how they might be connected to the challenges, rather than assuming we know what all the answers are. And actually, that community of people that we convene, they know themselves best. They know what skills they've got. They know how they can respond to challenges and problems. In some instances, we might not even be in the best place to even identify the challenges and problems. Maybe we're just about bringing people together, with, to get them to think about what they might want to do, right? It depends on the context of the organization.
That's great, isn't it? I mean, and especially for us who are involved in organizations, that is so difficult because we're usually almost peddling at the ways we do things and our structures, and it's quite hard sometimes to step back and say, actually, well, do you know what?
And it seemed to me this kind of ethos kind of really runs through lots of things they do, either deliberately or not, I don't know, but like it seems like you can apply that to this concept, which I was really interested and excited by at the start, of like this kind of leadership without a label, like leaders who are not called leaders necessarily, right? And I think finding people who are going to galvanize other people, who are going to bring other people along. And I guess it creates a fluidity of leadership as well, which depends on what the problem is and who is best placed to come up with that solution. And I think it's a really interesting thing we should perhaps challenge ourselves with as well, which is like, like that is really flexible volunteering. It's like sometimes you might be the leader, but sometimes you might not be. Sometimes these might be your tasks, sometimes they might not be. And, you know, how often are we in the business of putting labels on people or role titles on people and saying, this is what you do now and this is your set of responsibilities? That does put people in boxes. That does assume their role in the solution, and it fixes them in that position often. Whereas, you know, this concept of like we all have the potential to be leaders, and if you don't put a label on that, it gives people, you know, the chance to be the leader when it's their skills that present the opportunity. I think is really exciting and something to think about. And I really love the way Victoria described the sort of role of the organisation as almost like being the sort of the crash barriers on the motorway. It's like, actually, we're here to let people, you know, they're responsible for getting to the destination. You know, they've got, you know, they are the car, they are they're the fuel, they are all of that. That's over to them. You know, we're keeping you on the right road, so to speak, which again, I think is a real mindset shift and really, you know, flips some of our traditional thinking on its head. And that's before we even get onto recognition and how they recognize people. And I just think there's a really nice, smart sort of, you know, if certificates didn't have the numbers of years on it, what would they have on it? And how would you recognize people beyond the numbers? Which, again, is definitely something I'm going to be going away and thinking about. You know, Volunteers Week here in the UK, at least, is, you know, that first week of June every year. I'm sure a lot of us will be spending time giving out certificates and saying thank yous in various ways, and I'm sure a lot of them will have numbers on them. You know, what might they have if they didn't have numbers on is something that I think is an interesting challenge for us all to think about.
Yeah. Wow. Lots to take away. Lots indeed.
Absolutely. Well, huge thanks from me to Victoria. A great and very inspiring session.
Brilliant. And brilliant. Okay. I think that's the end of the podcast. Ready for the next one.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. It's Chris Wade here. Just a little reminder that if you've enjoyed this episode or other episodes of this podcast series, do tell your friends and your colleagues and pass the experience on. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you think Time for Impact can help you with anything in terms of developing your volunteering strategy, measuring and demonstrating the impact of volunteering, or indeed anything volunteering, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Oh, and I almost forgot, if you really like the podcast, you can buy Matt and I a coffee. I'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks then. Bye.